Please listen carefully.
Well, hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Christy Jansen.
And I'm Summers McKay.
And we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help us all get focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, can you hear the birds in Christy's home office-worthy podcast. Today is Monday, the 7th of March, 2022. Hi, Christy. How are you today?
I'm fine. I just realized that I've changed what I say back to getting focused on solutions instead of getting focused on what's going right in the world. Partly because it's hard to say that there's a lot going right in the world.
Right.
It feels like there's a lot that is challenging.
Yeah.
But even in the face of challenges, there's still solutions. And that's where the Optimist Daily stands.
Mm-hmm. The idea of what's going right in the world also suggests ignoring what's going wrong, if that makes sense, right? Whereas the solution-focused mindset is about asset framing.
Right.
It's about focusing on how we fix things as opposed to just the good things that are out there, if that makes sense. There's like this subtle difference. Hey, I just used a phrase, asset framing. I don't want to put you on the spot,
right? But
you talk to our writers all the time about understanding asset framing. And I think we're going to kind of do a deep dive into this and maybe a story on the Optimist Daily. But do you want to share with our listeners a little bit about what asset framing is versus deficit framing?
Well, asset framing is a narrative model that defines people by their assets and aspirations before noting the challenges and deficits. So it's a model that kind of turns it on its head. Instead of focusing on what's going wrong, you first focus on what the possibilities are. And it's how you speak about people, but I feel that it has the same approach to how you speak about the world. And that's kind of what the Optimist Daily is talking about. I heard Trabian Shorter's being interviewed a few months ago. He's the CEO of the Be Me community, and this is sort of his brainchild, I believe. He points out that we are hardwired to act upon narratives. We create narratives, we act upon narratives. So when you are always telling the same story about the negative in a person, you focus on their deficits first and then say, but you can still be better. That's a different way of framing things than say, you have so many amazing skills and talents, and here's the possibilities in your life. I'm going to help you move from where you feel frustrated and feel undercut all the time to where you're fully embracing your possibility. The Be Me community, they work with organizations, they work with governments, they work with different people to help them reframe how they tell their stories and how they even think about people to focus on the assets as opposed to the deficits. But it's something that's really started to characterize how I think about what we are doing with the Optimist Daily.
I think it's just such a valuable thing for people to consider for themselves. A very, very discrete example of this is we were talking about a headline on the Optimist Daily, which was healing gender pay inequality versus elevating gender pay equality. Two sentences that say the exact same thing, but they say them with one is solution focused and one is deficit focused.
They talk about like a good practice is to state what you want, sort of what your prime hope is, twice as often as you state what you don't want, which is your prime fear. So you state what you're hoping for, what you're going towards, where you want the world to be.
So it's law of attraction meets storytelling meets journalism. You and I, Christy, kind of were pretty good manifestors at getting things we want out of this world and this Optimist Daily job that we have that we absolutely love, and this amazing podcast that now has thousands of listeners. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, thank you for that mini education on asset framing. Kind of a riff there, but in framing our assets here today, we have some great stories on the Optimist Daily. I will go first, if that's all right with you. I'm an asthma mom, meaning I have a child who has asthma. I also have a husband who has asthma, and I have asthma. So this headline really spoke to me. The headline reads, anti-inflammatory molecule could revolutionize severe asthma treatment. People with asthma will often suffer at varying degrees. Symptoms can range from, shortness of breath, wheeziness, bouts of coughing, and basically it stems from an overactivation of the immune system when exposed to allergens like dust, smoke, pollution. It hyperreacts. Many of us remember having asthma as a child and have since outgrown it. However, recovering from COVID-19, it is not uncommon for childhood asthma to become reactivated. This has become a more present problem and not necessarily a long COVID symptom, but a reactivated symptom for a lot of adults. We have team members at the Optimist Daily who also struggle with asthma. Asthma is common. It is treatable, but there are new and improved treatments that are always something to celebrate, which is why we are delighted to report that researchers at Trinity College in Dublin have identified an inflammatory off-switch molecule that could effectively treat severe cases of asthma. The team built on past research that focused on a protein called the JAK1, JAK1, which plays an important role in driving your immune responses by signaling your immune cells to patrol the bodies for foreign pathogens. This protein, while essential, can sometimes react too fiercely, creating unnecessary inflammation. Inflammation is the cause of a lot of different conditions like Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma. One potential solution is a new class of drugs called JAK inhibitors, which are comprised of 4 closely related molecules, the JAK1, 2, 3, and TYK2. A new study that the Trinity researchers offered discovered that the JAK inhibitor is naturally produced by our own bodies, and the molecule, which is called itaconate, sort of acts as an off switch for inflammation. The shutting down of inflammation appears to help against asthma. The medicines based on itaconate could have potentially a wholly new therapeutic approach for treating severe asthma. So it's pretty exciting. The lead author of the study is Dr. Mara Runch. And for anyone who has heard their child having a hard time breathing or had a hard time breathing themselves, asthma advances are amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wonder if this kind of research will lead to advances in treating things like rheumatoid arthritis or other inflammatory conditions, because those can be very challenging to live with.
Yeah, exactly.
I like this kind of study. Great. Thanks for sharing this. My headline is similarly about a scientific advancement that might help us improve our future, while also maybe improving food security. The headline reads, "This development improves crop quality without genetic modification," which is a hotly debated topic, right? Modified crops, genetically modified crops, something that some countries prohibit because they're wary of the potential environmental impacts. Other places in the world, like the United States, are pretty open with their use. And part of the problem is that people are a little afraid of what happens when you start planting these seeds, which have been genetically modified, and those get pollinated or cross-pollinated with other plants, even in the same areas, which are not genetically modified. And then the genetic modification kind of takes over, and it has negative effects on pollinators, on other things that are just unintended, right? Well, there's a new process that might make the promise of these kinds of scientific advances in food production more digestible. Coming out of a group in Japan, scientists from the Riken Center for Sustainable Resources, or CSRS, have developed a way to improve crop quality with no genetic modification needed. Rather than altering the plant DNA in the seed, the alternative uses an active biomolecules in the form of a spray, which is applied to grown plants, and it ends up creating a similar result in the end. They use nanoparticles called cell-penetrating peptides, or CPPs, which are small enough to successfully penetrate plant cells. And they work in a similar way to changing the DNA of the plant, but instead of changing the entire DNA, it just works on an individual plant. It binds to DNA in that plant. The gene expression is able to be altered in several ways. It can influence yield. It can increase the number of pores for water uptake, which is good for drought resistance. It can also help the plant survive specific parasites. And details on how this technology works were included in the team's paper published in ACS Nano. What makes this treatment incredible is its ability to accurately target certain genes, so specific genes, thanks to a DNA attachment called a plasmid. This specific plasmid sequence means that the nanoparticles will only alter the particular plant it is applied to, so it won't actually get out into the world, and the protein product will then break down naturally in the wild. That's what the paper is saying. So this could reduce or even replace some pesticides and some fertilizers. it could also be extremely useful to reduce the negative environmental impacts of farming by allowing plants to use less water, for example, or survive in soils which have been suboptimal.
Right. It would reduce runoff, by reducing the use of pesticides or other fertilizers in the agriculture industry. It can reduce runoff that can then affect water supply. The idea is to make these plants stronger and healthier so that they do not need the alternative chemicals that can adversely affect other systems from agriculture.
So it's a more targeted approach to growing and improving yields in the field without some of the broad strokes where you're planting everything using fertilizers across the board, which then gets into our water systems.
So this plus agroforestry plus biodiversity plus solar and beehives makes the perfect world.
I don't know. I mean, it's just an interesting advance, and we'll have to follow it.
Yep.
But it is good to have biodiversity and to support our pollinators. We need to do that regardless of what else we do.
Yes.
So what else is on the headlines today, Summers?
So we have a microchip that makes the invisible visible. There are 5 clever ways to donate money without breaking the bank. And the creme de la creme of steaks now has a tasty plant-based alternative. What else, Christy?
Cyberbullying, I guess it decreased sharply during the pandemic. That's a neat finding. I didn't realize that. A massive beer brand is trading plastic rings for nature-friendly alternatives. We can stop seeing so many poor turtles with plastic 6-pack rings around their necks. And then there's a story about why you should add cleaning your plants to your to-do list to help them thrive in the spring. That's part of your spring cleaning, right?
You know what? It finally felt like spring this past weekend in Texas.
Ah, nice.
Birds chirping, and it was warm, and we played outside. So
clearly the birds are having a chirping party outside of my window here. So we're definitely in spring in California too.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the Optimist Daily Update. We promise to keep sharing positive, solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in a changing world and help ensure it is changed for the good. And we promise to keep covering current events with accurate, legitimate sources, offering you the information needed most to chart new paths for all of us.
If you like the Optimist Daily Update, if you like this podcast, if you like our stories, please share them with friends. Please post it on social media because we love doing this. We love doing it with you. We love connecting with our audiences, and we look forward to connecting with you more in the future. Thanks, everybody. We will be back tomorrow with more solutions.